On Earth, there are places which are kept secret. New fortresses built by men to house data. There, they store our memory, a digital memory, handled by supercomputers connected to each other in what is called the cloud. Today, our whole existence can be digitized. From our first ultrasound, every memory, every event, every bit of data can be digitized, composed only of 1 and of 0. Books, photos, films, music, money, post, identity, everything is digitized and stored so that it can be immediately available from anywhere. A connected memory both unlimited and untouchable. No one knows where the data which defines our lives is found. The cloud is a parallel universe where data circulates at the speed of light and where man has been replaced by numbers. Where are the billions of bits of data produced every second stored? How are the machines in the global network secured? To whom do we entrust the memory of humankind? Man has a short memory. Despite its capacity and its billions of neurons, the brain cannot remember everything. So since the beginning of time, man has used props to retain knowledge, memories, history, and to hand them down to future generations.
We soon realized that it was not possible to retain everything. We began with stone, papyrus, codices, and then we had books, printing. Now there is a third stage, which is externalization, more digital, so more virtual, but which is nonetheless extraordinary, which our brains have found to externalize knowledge we cannot store permanently in our brains.
All the accounts accumulated over the centuries have become the other human memory, the memory of the world. They are stacked up in archives, libraries, museums. These gatekeepers have until today been the only guarantors of our memory. With the digital revolution, these traces of our history are becoming non-palpable. They are being transformed into statistics, into data stored on hard drives inside places where there is no life. Thanks to these new gatekeepers, our memory seems limitless, imperishable. Today we have at our disposal a gigantic IT brain which rules both our daily lives and the entire economy of our planet. But henceforth, this memory of the world is no longer a collective or individual asset. It is controlled by private businesses. It has become merchandise, which must be used for profit-making. This revolution, both technological and economic, brings with it numerous promises for the future. But without our realizing it, it also represents a danger for the security and legacy of the memory of mankind. Since 1975, the National Audiovisual Institute has been the memory of French radio and television. Until now, the Institute's heritage, the only testimony to the customs, pastimes, and also the history of the 20th century, has been conserved in these boxes, aligned over more than 150 kilometers of shelves. But since television and radio have become digital, the Institute handles only data, an unprecedented amount of data. Operators continuously record 100 TV and 20 radio channels, and also more than 11,000 internet sites. In 1 year, 1 million program hours and billions of web pages have been backed up, labeled, checked and classified. With the digital transition, archivists are now IT engineers. Shelves are computers.
Digital transitions means two different things. On the one hand, with new material, we can keep it digital as it is originally digital. On the other hand, there is all the material which we receive in analog form, which is everything that was created from about 1950 for television, 1930 for radio, and which had analog backup. How do we transfer that to the digital world?
At the heart of the Institute, Jean-Michel Rode supervises a vast program of the digitization of France's audiovisual heritage. Day after day, video cassettes, records and tapes of all ages pass through the hands of technicians to be digitized. All the Institute's collections pass through here. 70 years of radio, 60 years of television. The task is colossal but necessary. Part of the heritage is under threat from the weather, damp and extensive use.
Analog formats, video and also audio, weren't made to last. It wasn't something that would last forever. Every time a new copy was made, the signal was distorted. It wouldn't have been possible for, say, 200 years to keep running analog copies. Digitization came at the right time, meaning that without digitization, we wouldn't have known in time how to preserve this heritage.
In digitization, the analog signal recorded on the tape, which contains sounds and images, is transformed into millions of bytes. Each of these bytes is a specific barcode composed of 1 and 0, a binary language only understood by computers, provided there is a good program to decode it. Once digitized, the signal carrying information is more robust. It is a computer file which can be copied, compressed, recopied, transformed, and then streamed in moments with no loss of information ad infinitum. Today, like the Institute, all the historical gatekeepers of our heritage are going digital. The memory of the world is becoming universal, shared by all. In the end, billions of bytes are gradually replacing kilometers of archives. The enormity of this phenomenon can be measured in the United States. On the East Coast, to be precise, in the region where the byte was invented in the 1950s. Boston is one of the country's oldest cities. With its prestigious universities, Harvard or MIT, the city is a breeding ground for grey matter. Together with Silicon Valley in California, the Boston area is the other great American technological hub. Here, the libraries are particularly advanced in the digitization of their collections. This building houses the memorial of the 35th American president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Here we find documents related to his career, family memorabilia, and also almost all the original manuscripts of Ernest Hemingway. For some years, all the accounts of American history have been methodically scanned, digitized, recorded. A painstaking task, a titanic task. the aim of which is to diffuse to the greatest possible number of people, via the internet, historical treasures previously reserved for researchers.
It requires a lot of memory, a lot of storage. We started off with 17 terabytes of storage space. We've exceeded that. In the 5 years, we're now at 180 terabytes worth of storage that we've filled. We believe that we have about 5 to 10 petabytes worth of storage that we will need to digitize everything.
10 petabytes, the equivalent of 2.5 million DVDs for storage. It seems a lot. It is, however, a drop in the ocean. A drop in the ocean of the data generated today by every one of our activities. From antiquity to 2003, humankind accumulated 5 exabytes of knowledge, the equivalent of what we create today in a few hours with our telephones, our computers, our tablets, our cameras. We are entering a new era. Marketing specialists call it the big data era. We discover new units of size. After the giga, the tera, and the peta, here is the exabyte and its billions of giga. According to a recent study, our digital universe will double in size every 2 years to become in 2020 almost 40 zettabytes, i.e. 40,000 billion bytes. To back up all this data, some have amused themselves by calculating that it would take more than 2 piles of DVDs stretching from Earth to the planet Mars. So the digital revolution has given birth to new industrial giants, providers of IT memory. This leafy suburb is the historic fiefdom of EMC, one of the first providers in the world of servers and hard drives. Little known to the general public, EMC nonetheless has a turnover of $20 billion a year and nearly 55,000 employees. Jean-Yves Pronier is French. He is marketing director for Southern Europe and acts as guide to allow us access to the corridors of this very discreet company. We are greeted by one of the big bosses of the company, Chuck Hollis. This affable American is a guru on big data, which he considers a new source of progress for humankind.
Hey, Jeep, good to see you. How you been? Good. Please have a seat. Thank you. It has become so easy to capture every part of our lives, our business activities, the earth around us, the universe. The technologies have become so cheap, so easy to use that we're amassing enormous amounts of information. This is creating opportunity to share more widely, to explore, to analyze. So many of us think this is the new Renaissance.
This new era of scientific discovery and extra revenue relies on one imperative: development of technology capable of storing ever-increasing amounts.
You ask if we could have big data without storage. It's a question like, could we have literature without paper? All of this information has to live somewhere.
This somewhere, these machines capable of holding billions of bits of data, can be found on the first floor of the building. This is one of the development laboratories at EMC. Here, engineers test the latest household technology under real conditions. This technology, these cupboards overflowing with diodes and multicolored cables, are, in the jargon, storage bays or servers.
These hard drives are more or less what you have in your PC at home, with perhaps some small difference in performance, different capacity. There we have disks which are 3 tera, 2 tera. So each of these disks is in total a minimum of 4 times what you have in your PC at home. There are 240 disks in this unit, and you could have up to 10 units like this. So, you can imagine, we can cope with absolutely enormous capacity.
The performance of these supercomputers is 10,000 times greater than that of domestic computers. In the 60s, it cost several $1,000s to back up just a few megabytes. Today, a gigabyte costs barely 10 cents, and an individual can buy hard drives of 4 terasets.
Unfortunately, our appetite to generate and consume information far outstrips what the technology itself is doing.
The amount of data which now needs to be backed up is such that simple hard drives no longer suffice. To store the memory of the world, we have to rely on more and more complex technology. As an architect of memory, EMC assembles its hard drives and adds security and intelligence software to get them to work together, to integrate them in computer language. Once the machines are configured and tested, they're delivered to all 4 corners of the Earth, in computer suites and big businesses, administrative bodies, and internet companies.
It is, in effect, the heart of IT infrastructure. So it's exciting because it's technological, impersonal. We mustn't forget that they are means which allow us to save lives, to allow people to live, to run an economy, and so on. We must understand that beyond technology for technology's sake, it provides useful services, and we'll see in the coming years, obviously, that IT will become more and more omnipresent. So, we have to realize that behind a Facebook, this is the kind of stuff you see. Through services which stream music and which allow legal downloading, there's also this kind of technology. There is a link between technology and use and ultimately people, and that's why it's exciting. It really is the corridors of IT memory, the corridors of humanity as it happens.
These machines are far too complicated for us, too expensive too. Each one can cost several $1 million. They are not always reliable and need maintenance. So from now on, we entrust these supercomputers and our memory along with them to new gatekeepers, professionals in online storage. It's simple, practical, only a click away.
Many of the people I know have just decided to not own the personal storage anymore and use cloud services, simply because they don't want to have racks and racks of disk drives that they're responsible for. So the other thing that I think is worth noting is that it's become so big and so important that we're trusting other people to handle this information for us. I always wondered what the logic was. Yeah.
Regarding this is very
Okay, go. After you. Let's go send up into the cloud. The electricity is a very good analogy. Back in the first part of the 20th century, if you were in the manufacturing business, you had to build your own power plant. 30 years later, that was all gone. Electricity came from the grid, we had modern utilities, and the same thing is happening in the IT industry as we speak.
So memory is disappearing from our attics, leaving the libraries. From now on, it will accumulate in new formats, thousands, millions of formats, which are themselves stored in new places, hidden, discrete, and linked by the internet. As with electricity, these new kinds of centers supply us on demand, our digital memory. They are called data centers. To find out what these new memory fortresses are like, we return to the suburbs of Paris. The address is secret. The building is discreet, anonymous, and protected. To gain entry, obligatory biometric access. The site is one of 3 data centers of Online, a subsidiary belonging to the Liad Group, the parent company of the operator Free. The place is a veritable bunker, a high-tech safe where neither banknotes nor gold ingots are stored, but data. Billions of bytes belonging to businesses, internet sites, professional online storage companies. Information is stored behind these bars on hundreds of thousands of hard drives which are stacked and aligned in glass cases. Each time a user has remote access to retrieve or register data, a diode lights up. Information disseminates in milliseconds. The place is almost empty, and yet it is the heart of our present-day economies, the heart of the cloud.
There's nothing virtual about it. From the moment you put a photo online, you check your emails, you pay your taxes over the internet, loads of things. All that relies on physical infrastructures, which function 24/7, high-speed computers with huge storage capacity, which need temperature control, and electricity which functions 24/7.
So in a data center, the perenniality of our memory relies on industrial equipment. All these machines heat up, but cannot tolerate heat. The temperature in the rooms is maintained at a constant 21 degrees Celsius, thanks to a cooling system. Icy water is injected into 3 networks of pipes to cool the ventilated air in the building. To function, these installations need energy, a lot of energy. Alone, this center of 11,000 square meters needs 20 megawatts of electricity, the equivalent of power needed for a town of 30,000 inhabitants. In case of total power failure, hundreds of batteries are on standby to assure transmission for a handful of seconds, the time needed for the backup generators to kick in. Further away, we find the operations room, one of the most critical places. More than 800 optic fibers carrying the data converge in this nerve center. Like the other installations in the data center, this room has a mirror image in another part of the site.
It's always the same principle, to minimize the risk. And to do so, the simplest method consists of doubling, tripling, quadrupling the infrastructure, so as not to depend on just one infrastructure, but on several.
Behind the opaqueness of the cloud, there is concrete material. Technological and industrial fortresses deserted by people, where our memory appears safe. These data bunkers, these industrial plants giving us our memories on demand, are popping up like mushrooms all over the world. In Europe, the majority of data centers are near big economic hubs: Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, London, and Dublin. With their climates favorable to cooling the servers, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland are also hosting more and more data centers. Although countries like India, China, Russia, and Brazil are also beginning to build their own infrastructures, most of the memory of the world is stored elsewhere. In the United States. There are centers all over the country, but certain regions have become the El Dorado of the cloud. Boston, New York, Virginia, North Carolina, California, and Oregon. The reason the majority of data centers are in the States is mainly because the main players in the cloud are American multinationals, who today are all part of our daily lives. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and the most symbolic of all, Google. Every day, Over 3 billion requests are handled by their search engine, which is the first port of call for accessing our digital memory. Like a modern-day librarian, Google lists, registers and files more than 30,000 billion documents, almost all the contents of the internet on the planet. Through different servers, the site also stores our messages, photos, films, work documents. And in digitizing books, newspaper articles, even entire museums, Google becomes a gatekeeper for our collective memory. All this memory is stored on hundreds of thousands of servers in Google's data centers. Where exactly are they? How many are there in total? Google does not want to answer these questions and is happy to showcase a few official images designed to prove that thanks to the technology they use, the information is safe. It must be said that for Google, our data is golden. In exchange for services which appear to be free, the company registers our personal data at every hit, our habits, tastes, profiles, computer addresses. All this information is compiled, analyzed, then sold on to brands which target our interests and offer us their products. This targeted advertising earns Google over $50 billion a year. For the cloud players, our memory becomes virtual merchandise, a common product which can no longer even be localized. Behind the practical aspects of these tools, which have become indispensable in our lives, hides a more worrying reality. We, simple individuals, find ourselves at the center of a gigantic global business whose rules we don't understand.
Individuals have access to the entire world, but cannot understand that they are entrusting their life ambitions, their memory, to a group of disparate players who answer to different regimes, who are in different places, whose laws they don't understand, including me, a professor of law. I don't know the laws applicable in Delaware or California, or in the data centers of other countries.
For this lawyer, the new masters of our memory have taken control of our data without guaranteeing either its security or long-term durability.
They offer to store data, but with many limitations in terms of responsibility. Firstly, they say that they do what they can to assure security, but that they must obviously concede to the demands of any government or judicial body who wants to access the data. We offer you a storage service, but you must know that hard drives can crash and that we cannot unconditionally guarantee that the data will always be there. Read the terms and conditions. Nobody ever does, whereas everyone clicks accept. But when you read them, it's clearly stated that there are no firm guarantees of, say, the permanence of conserving the details. We can use them, but we must accept the risk. In any case, we are expected to accept, to think there is none.
What seemed simple at the touch of a click turns out to be nebulous, complex, risky. In the cloud, our data is beyond our control. Our memory is now stored in fortresses beyond our reach by private businesses whose aim is to exploit it, to make a profit from it. Through ignorance, through innocence, or simply through lack of alternative, we entrust more and more of our memory to these new gatekeepers without questioning, with our eyes shut. It's a situation all the more risky because the confidentiality of our details is not guaranteed in many countries. Richard Stallman, the father of free software and considered a veritable star by IT engineers and hackers, has a truly alarmist opinion on the subject. This global storage system, orchestrated by IT giants, threatens our lives and our freedom.
Users of computing are being led into abandoning this control and trusting companies that shouldn't be trusted. That even if they were as honest as could be, can't be trusted because of the laws they operate under.
A symbol of total absence of protection, the United States. Since the 2001 terrorist attacks, the country has armed itself with a specific judicial arsenal, the famous Patriot Act.
That law says that the FBI can collect almost any digital data that a company has about people without even a court order. You might consider it the opposite of data protection. It's the Data Violation Act of the US. In addition, all the communications between the clients in Europe and the server in the US are being monitored as they go in and out of the US. So again, it's systematic data violation. So European companies should not be allowed to host any websites in the US or in other countries which don't adequately protect data.
In France and in Europe, transfer of private data is forbidden to certain countries, shown in red on this map. But the US, in blue, still has an exemption, which is increasingly being challenged. This American supremacy poses another question, still more strategic. How can we assure the conservation and the control of the most sensitive data, that of the states? To limit the risks, governments have no choice. They have to come up with increasingly secure infrastructures. In France, each ministry manages its own IT network, and the state has a total of at least 100 data centers. In the suburbs close to Paris, this secret site of the Ministry of the Interior is kept under close guard. Here, nearly 6 million identity cards are fabricated every year. Personal details are digitized on the spot, then stored in the server room. In these machines, the police store about 300 terabytes of sensitive and indispensable data. Passports, driving licenses, car registration documents, digital fingerprints, the lists of wanted persons and terrorists in Europe. None of these highly strategic elements ever leaves the ministry's enclave. All its installations are monitored from this room.
The ministry's 4 data centers are interconnected by high-speed networks, which are operated by the Ministry of the Interior. And in the same way, all the user terminals for the prefecture or the police are linked by a network which the minister himself operates, which allows for both flexibility and a degree of security in access to the network.
Thus, national security rests on the reliability of these public networks. The threats are very real. Hacking is becoming widespread throughout the world. Today, the French network is based on data centers which are too small, too numerous, making the system vulnerable. Conscious of the problem, the Management of Interdepartmental Information and Communication Systems of the State, DISIC, plans to modernize all storage systems and aims to guarantee its citizens zero risk.
It's true that there's an awareness of the need to invest. The state needs to invest to be able to effectively change its production capacity, group together more. So we must move from 100 data centers to somewhat fewer. The number is not yet determined. We're working on it with the ministers. Regrouping is also a way of having more favorable team numbers, which would be better for team expertise, thus better technological expertise, better security, better supervision, etc. So better conservation of data.
A country's digital independence and security needs modern tools and money, a lot of money. The amount of data to be stored is ever increasing, and above all, storage systems constantly evolving. The state, like all digital memory gatekeepers, has embarked on an endless course of modernizing its equipment. But today, the pace has quickened.
In analog times, you might receive a paper folder from the National Archives, place it on a shelf, come back 100 years later, and it was still there even if the paper had deteriorated. Digital technology is completely different. You have to constantly move things around. The signal is robust, but not the data support media.
A hard drive must be changed at least every 5 years, or data may be lost. An optical disc like a DVD can last 15 to 20 years, as long as it's not used and is protected from light and humidity. Worse, the machines or programs which read our data will be obsolete in a few years, relegated to the cupboard like so many inventions, pioneers in their times, but now veritable antiquities.
It's impossible not to do something about it, to put things on a shelf and come back 50 or 100 years later. In any case, these machines won't exist to read them. The data support media would be worn. We would no longer be able to read them.
This permanent migration of data support, formats or software is not the only constraint found in digital technology. A further danger threatens our memories, an overdose of data.
When we started out, there were 3 channels. Today, there are more than 100. So effectively, the stakes have gone into overdrive. So if technical recording work is not done alongside the necessary cataloging, indexing, documenting, there's no point, because we'd never find the images in this vast arena, which equals millions of hours' work in the Institute today. So the role of documenting is absolutely key, and just as important as the purely technical or technological work.
Without considerable archive and indexing work, without the necessary investment for constant updating of equipment, the memory of the world is under threat. Countries, businesses, institutions, and all those who do have the means would be forced to watch their data disappear, or have to lose control by entrusting them to private operators. Set in Paris, UNESCO, the United Nations Organization for Education, Science and Culture, protects towns and areas of exceptional natural beauty. With its Memory of the World program, UNESCO also protects documentary heritage of humanity in all its forms from destruction. Joy Springer, head of the program, is worried about the risk of amnesia hovering over our digital memory.
Amnesia, in the sense that I'm talking about, refers to all types of heritage. If you don't have your past, if you don't have your identity, if you don't have your culture, then you've lost everything.
For UNESCO, digital technology is only useful for preservation of documents which are disintegrating or to disseminate and share information. But it's in no way a backup for archives long term.
The information on a stone tablet can last for millennia. The information on an e-tablet may not last for as much as 10 years. It is up to us to make sure that we take all the precautions in the world to ensure that that content remains valid.
The first precaution, to conserve the original, then make multiple copies and back them up. Unfortunately, too many countries and individuals don't yet do this.
What we have seen is that there are many countries that start to digitize their heritage because they know that digitizing can make it accessible. And then they believe that this is the end of the matter. Unfortunately, it is just the beginning.
The advent of digital technology could therefore threaten the memory of humankind. To preserve our knowledge, culture, history, and hand it down to future generations, we must find an alternative. Currently, the only technology which can guarantee a storage solution which is more reliable and longer lasting is not digital. It's being developed here in Grenoble. This innovation has been named the nanoform by its creator. It consists of a transparent disc on which images and texts are directly engraved. In a way, the equivalent of a third millennium hieroglyph.
Inasmuch as the information is in the form of micro-images, it doesn't need interpreting in order to be accessed. So tomorrow, in 50 years, 100 years, in every expanding system, the image will allow access to the image. There's no need for permanent maintenance or constant porting of information.
The details of these images make up a few microns, hardly as thick as a horse's hair. To read the data, they just have to be enlarged, a bit like an old microfilm.
We have here texts, for example. On a surface like this, we have the whole of the New Testament. On a surface like this, we have a book, Arabic, called Incoherence of the Incoherence by Averroes. And then we have reproductions of different interpretations of the Mona Lisa, for example.
Like hieroglyphs, this disc should still be readable several centuries from now. To find out about how it's made, you have to cover up, head to toe. Welcome to the white rooms of the Electronic IT Laboratory, the prestigious LETI. Here, over nearly 10,000 square meters, the air is totally pure. Not one single particle can be allowed to interfere with the high-precision work of these engineers who make microprocessors and chips of all kinds. This is where the nanoform is being developed.
At the base, we have a single crystal sapphire wafer, which is transparent. We use sapphire because it's incredibly robust and durable. Then we put a deposit of titanium nitride on the wafer, which dyes the wafer. Then we spread a layer of resin, which we can write on with laser, to create a stencil, which we then engrave on.
Engraving the miniature information on the disc can take up to 8 hours.
Here we can see that the engraving has gone very well. On the wafer, the nanoform, there's a series of photos of the city of Grenoble highly reduced, meaning the original dimensions were postcards, standard postcards. And here they're reduced to 2 millimeters in height and 3 millimeters wide.
Once engraved, the disc is covered with another layer of blank sapphire. These two surfaces must be completely smooth. No particle can be allowed to slide between them.
We simply prepare the surfaces so that they fuse spontaneously when they're put in contact. So it's really the atoms themselves which interact and allow the surfaces to bond. So it's a very strong bond, there's no glue, so nothing can get damaged when it's heated and so on. The bond remains the same, even if it's heated to 1,200 degrees, it will remain totally intact.
The information engraved is literally locked in, encapsulated in stone between the two layers of sapphire. Nothing can change it for almost 1,000 years. For the moment, the nanoform still costs several thousand euros and only contains the equivalent of 4 gigabytes. But with the progress of nanotechnology, it could well become the storage medium of the future. Moreover, it's already of interest to businesses and administrations which want to preserve precious information such as patents or public deliberations. In the end, it's a curious paradox. Paper, film and stone are still the best media for conserving memory long term. These analog solutions have nevertheless one major inconvenience. They are not capable of the infinite storage offered by digital technology and thus demand prioritizing. In this era of the big data, our memory is exploding. Our storage media, be it concrete or online, is bursting with data, photos, films, emails. Today, we no longer prioritize things. We keep them. We share what is essential and what is superfluous. But in order to save what is essential, we will doubtless actually have to learn to forget, rather like, in the end, our brain does.
Forgetting is an integral part of our memory. Is it a complementary element or a necessary one? I would say that it's more philosophical than biological. But as an individual, let's say understanding memory, I am naturally pleased that I don't remember everything. Of course we forget. Of course we don't remember certain things. Memory should support our actions and thoughts, not act as a brake.
This profusion of data, of information, risks disturbing our memory. Or worse, our very thoughts. Digital technology relies mainly on robots and software, which do our thinking for us.
When you type in a word in Google, Google anticipates what you're typing, so you don't have to type to the end of the word. That's great. It makes your life easier. It's great. But at the same time, there is a downside. You forget how to spell. Automation encourages a process of unlearning. So it's a model which ineluctably leads to entropy, mnemonic impoverishment, impoverishment of memory.
As with all technological change, the advent of digital technology means a big change in our behavior, both individual and collective.
The result of this is not knowing everything, but an illusion of knowing. I do not believe that you find knowledge on Google, or that you have access to knowledge on the internet. I don't believe that at all. You have access to information, but this information must be transformed into knowledge in order for it to become knowledge. And this transforming into knowledge is done by the person who receives it. So if you haven't learned how to transform it, you won't be able to. You'll be manipulated.
There is obviously no question of doing without these tools, which are practical and have become indispensable to our daily lives. Our challenge today is more one of learning how to use them better.
We've invented a whole new class of tools. We live in a world of exabytes of information, and we were not trained or educated to thrive in this world, right? It's a very new world. It's almost like being picked up and landed 40 years in the future. It takes a little while to get oriented.
If we want to conserve and pass on our memory, our heritage, our recollections, we must all learn once more to prioritize, to file, index, copy. Henceforth, we must all once more become the gatekeepers of our own memories, before others take total control.